Hi, this is Dr. Morris. I am just wanting to give you some information that I would have given you in class if we wouldn't have missed class on Wednesday. So I just did a quick slideshow and I've got some documents up on Blackboard for you to look at. This is just a little bit of background and preparation for the rhetorical event papers that I would like you to be thinking about over spring break. And I just wanted to give you a head start on these so that you could prepare. So the first thing I want to do is to give you an overview, and then I'll go and break the parts down for you. The purpose of these papers is for you to choose a rhetorical event and to take the concepts and terms that we've learned in class or some that you've worked on outside of class and apply them to the event in order to make an argument about them. So the first part of this is an event. The second part of it is the theory and concept. As you think about it, you'll notice that these are very similar to the critical papers. They're just sort of exploded, and they give you a chance to kind of develop some of those ideas. You are welcome to use both terms and rhetorical events that you've talked about before or that we've used in class. You're welcome to move with those. The one thing that I'd like you to focus on with the events is that they need to be contemporary. And by that, I mean they need to have happened in your lifetime. I want you to have been a potential audience member for the event. And in many cases, I think it's best if you actually were an audience member for the event in one way or another. Okay, let me have you look more closely at the details. I've put up two worksheets for you. You're going to have more than one part to this paper. You're going to turn in first a description of the event, secondly a description of the rhetorical concepts, and I've given you worksheets to help you think about those. So for the events, one of the things you need to do is think about background and context. Now, obviously, many things lead up to these rhetorical events. You need to choose the information that you need to tell us as readers in order for us to understand what conclusions you're coming to. That doesn't mean you need to give the history of civil rights if you're looking at something that happened in response to the Civil Rights Act. It just means that you need to give us some detail about what brought about this particular event, what kinds of things we need to know about it in order to interpret it along with you or to be open to your interpretation. One of the things you'll need to tell us about is the discontinuity, which, as Hauser describes, is that rift that creates the need. And then you need to tell us what the rhetorical response was. What was the nature of it? What did it look like? When did it start? When did it finish? That kind of thing. In addition, who are the audience members or the audiences? Many of these events have multiple audiences. Some of those audiences are intended, and some of them are accidental. So you need to think about who the audiences are. And then you need to think about the result of the rhetorical event. What happened as a consequence of this? Now, we don't always necessarily think of what resulted as the primary criteria for success or failure, but it certainly is one aspect of it. Next, you need to think about the rhetorical concepts you're going to use to talk about and make an argument for this rhetorical event. On the worksheet, you're asked several things. One is the keywords or terms that you're going to use. I discourage you from using too many. I don't want you to have a primarily descriptive paper. So you need to use terms that help you make an argument, not just describe. So one or two terms. You'll need to provide definitions of those terms. You'll need to support those definitions with quotations from research. And you need to think about why these terms and why these quotations. So you need to have good reasons for choosing them. Also, how do these concepts help us to understand the rhetorical event? So you need to think about using these terms to make an argument. So if you're using ethos to talk about Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, then doing so must help you make an argument about it. So no one but MLK could have made this speech because, or he got away with this speech because, he inspired because of his history. and the ethos that the audience saw. So you need to have a very clear argument. I will argue X because of Y. And the why needs to be very much supported by these key concepts. And then finally, the research. What do others have to say about the event and about the rhetorical concepts and their use? So you need to find out how these terms have been used in the past. In some cases, your events will have been written about by rhetoricians. So you might want to start and see what they have to say to get some guidance. Sometimes you're not going to have critical work that has been written for these topics. So you're going to have to, you may be the first to write on them in that way. But people have probably had things to say about the events, even if they aren't scholarly things about the events. So you might want to make use of those. And in addition to the rhetorical concepts and their use, what I have done in the past is to use a certain approach with epideixis to interpret epideictic events. So my reason for approaching my interpretation from a certain perspective is based on a critic, and it's very helpful to have that support in the paper. You have 3 different due dates, one for the rhetorical event description, one for the theory and concepts, and one for the paper itself. Right now, April 7th is the rhetorical event description deadline, April 14th for the theory, and April 21st for the first draft to be reviewed, the 25th for the draft to come to me to be graded. So these will be broken down. I'm going to really invite you into writing this as a process. Finally, the thing I want you to think about a lot is planning time to revise and getting feedback. Hopefully the first 2 short worksheets that you complete will help you get started, and that will give you some revision time. But I hope that you also have time to have someone else look at these things and get feedback and make revisions. And I don't know if I've shown you this picture before, but this is the draft of a speech that Obama gave, and this is after his speechwriters wrote it, and these are the changes that he made to the speech. So just so that you can remember, even really gifted people do lots and lots of revision. Revision is part of the process rather than a failure. If you have any questions about the paper, feel free to email me and keep track of questions for class. Have a good spring break.